Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rising Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Danielle Bird, and today we have a special guest, Rich Alderton. I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself. If you would like to do that, Rich, you can go right ahead.
Oh, thanks very much. And thanks for having me on, Danielle. Hi, everyone. Rich Alderton. I'm an adaptability advisor. So I help people and organizations, leadership teams to become more adaptable in how they're thinking so that they can mentally prepare themselves for whatever comes next.
Beautiful. That's awesome. How did you get into this? Do you want to give us a little bit about you, who you are?
Yeah, I came by this because I climbed some way up the corporate ladder. I started off making gummy bears in a factory in Nottingham in England. And I ended up sitting on the board of a listed company. And what I noticed as I made my progression through my career was that it didn't really matter how senior people were, where they were from, how much they earned, what their job title was. Everybody, it seems, well, most people seem to resist most change most of the time. And the few of us who really naturally enjoyed change seem to be in the minority. And all I could see was that if we're going to go through a life that is going to entail more and more change, which seems to be the way things are going, then if you don't like change, then you're going to be less and less engaged in your life as it progresses from this very day forward. And I thought, that sucks. What can I do about that? So I kind of gave up. I managed to make it to being a kind of middle order CEO of a multinational. And I could have gone on, with my CEO career, but I just decided to give all that up and to focus wholly on helping people to love change as much as I do, so that ultimately they'll be able to enjoy rather than endure the life of change that surely lies ahead for us all. And that's what got me into this.
I love that. That's really a very important niche. I mean, the only thing that is constant in life is change. So
that's right.
Definitely hit the nail right there. So go ahead and talk to us a little bit more about what it looks like. What does it look like to be embodied as someone who is adaptable to change?
Okay, so to answer that question, you really need to understand why we resist change in the first place. And that comes back to, some wiring that we have. That they say that when you're born, you only fear two things, which is loud noises and falling. But by the time we get to about 2 years old and we're a bit more aware of our circumstances, we start getting a bit of anxiety about, what's going on out there. And of course, back in the days of the saber-toothed tiger, when we were roaming the plains with them, developing fear and anxiety were really good things. But they have become, although they were designed or evolved to be self-protecting, they've become largely self-defeating these days. So if you're going to talk about adaptability and becoming more adaptable, I don't think you can have that conversation without talking about fear and anxiety. I never set out to be a mental health specialist. I was a pretty tough CEO when I needed to be. I haven't got legions of fans around the world for some of the things that I've done. But I do understand that if we're going to become more adaptable, then we have to understand how we can address people's fears and anxieties. And one of the most important things that I've discovered in my research is that fear and anxiety are different things. Now, I need to say that the anxiety that I talk about is really only the kind of common garden, everyday, kind of subclinical anxiety that we all feel from time to time, especially when we think about change, especially when we think about the future and what it might have in store for us. So the key differences, well, there's a few, but key amongst the differences between fear and anxiety is that fear is your reaction to a clear and present danger. It's something that's actually happening right here, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And your reaction to anxiety is really caused by your thoughts about what might possibly happen, but actually probably won't,
Mm-hmm.
at some point in the future. And knowing that those two things are actually different isn't just a nice academic exercise. It means that we can actually treat them differently too.
Mm-hmm.
So we use fear and anxiety interchangeably in common parlance, but in fact, we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
And when we so anxiety, for example, I mean, look, I'm sure Danielle, you know this stuff better than I do, but anxiety is the product of two brilliant things that we have. One is called negativity bias, which again was evolved as a self-protecting mechanism. It's that thing that makes us focus on what could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
How often do we focus on what could possibly go right? That's because we're wired that way. And the other thing we have that no other species in the 9 million species on this planet have, which is the ability to create a future that doesn't yet exist. We have imagination. Now, on their own, these are brilliant things, but you put negativity bias together with a highly active imagination, and guess what? You're just going to make up a car crash for yourself that's almost certainly never going to happen.
Right.
Some of our anxiety is well-founded, and it does still protect us to this day.
For
But
sure.
most, in fact, research, Penn State University tried to quantify this, and they found that 90% of what we worry about never happens.
Amazing.
So think what we could do with all that energy if we could not just not be negative about life, but if we could reverse that and use all of that energy positively, what would our lives look like and feel like? And that's kind of, you know, the quest that I'm on, to help people understand that even when the worst negative things happen to you, you lose your job, you lose a loved one, whatever it is, bad things are going to happen to all of us, because if we live and love in this world, we're going to lose those at some point, whether that's a parent or a friend or whatever it is. And adaptability is about being able to be positive, even when the changes that are happening to you are negative, when they're unfounded, unwanted, unappreciated, and yet unavoidable.
I love that. That's awesome. I really like that you talked about imagination there, because that's something that I often find is those who struggle the most with anxiety are the most imaginative and creative people.
Yep. So a neuroscientist called Joseph Ledoux said that anxiety is the price we pay for having an active imagination.
Literally.
And you're absolutely right. I think the more creative a person you are, the more that you can make stuff up about the future. So what you do is you create a negative future situation that might happen, and then you multiply that by another negative situation that might happen, and then you end up multiplying that by your phone number, and, you know, and then, you know, all of a sudden you've fallen off an exponential cliff that was totally fabricated.
Right.
So the great thing then, so that's only half the job that we do. We basically help people deal with their fear. It is entirely possible to learn how to control your fear. You may not be able to stop feeling it, but you can control it. And you can absolutely manage your anxiety. The American Psychological Association says that anxiety is highly treatable.
Absolutely.
So what we do is basically help people get out of their own way, because for the most part, the fear that we feel and the anxiety that we make up is largely unhelpful to us. And once we've got ourselves out of our own way, then we can start seeing change for what it really is. And that is, it's the best chance any of us is ever going to get to find out what we can do, what we're really capable of, and who we could be. Oh, and by the way, it also gives us the chance to make a difference to society in ways that just hanging on to the status quo is never going to give us.
Yeah,
So
it brings fulfillment.
So all of a sudden, we've gone from this isn't just about coping with change and trying to get through, you know, a bad experience. This is about actually starting to ask ourselves a question of, you know, it's a bit existential. Why are we here? If not to make a difference, which
Right.
is another way of saying creating change or riding with change. What is it that we are here to do? If you just want to sit tight and sit on your hands until your pension kicks in, well, is that really the best use of your life?
Right.
And you know, I've had people talk to me who have had the most disastrous things happen to them, things that you just couldn't imagine. And those people are able to speak positively about stuff that they've then gone on to do, and that those negative experiences have actually propelled them further than they were before those things happened. And I'm just in awe when people can do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's definitely utilizing the adaptability to its T.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what are kind of some of the skills that you would teach someone?
Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples, and I'll use me as the guinea pig here,
Sure.
because when I developed all this stuff, of course, you don't call yourself an adaptability advisor unless you
Right.
think you're pretty good at being adaptable. So I developed this model based on my 25 years of leading change in some of the world's most innovative companies all over the world. And I was really happy to set up my own business and start using the model and helping people, and the feedback I got, everything was going well. I never thought that I would have to use these tools myself.
On yourself.
I thought I was kind of good to go.
Yeah. Don't we all?
But a couple of years ago, just as most of the world, and certainly here in the UK, when we were going into lockdown at the beginning of 2020, I was diagnosed with cancer of the tonsils. I mean, who even knew that was a thing, right? And as I went into the consultant's office to get the news, I had no idea that's what I was going in for. They'd taken my tonsils out. You know, I was a bit sad that if that had happened to me when I was 10 years old, I'd have been given ice cream. When it happens to you when you're 55, well, they give you the news that you've got cancer, which was a bit of a downer, and it came as a complete shock to me. I really wasn't expecting it at all. Thank goodness my wife was with me. But I went into a state of fear. I had that clear and present danger, that saber-toothed tiger reared up. It was wearing a white coat, but it was certainly a saber-toothed tiger. And I went into a state of fear. And what happened after that was the health machine went into overdrive, and I spent the rest of the day going around pretty much every department, it seemed, in the hospital, getting x-rays and having my teeth looked at and all sorts of things. And one of the things that I actually managed to remember, something that I teach my clients, is an antidote to fear called discovery. So the fight or flight makes you want to run away from the source of your fear. That's your instinctive reaction. And actually, it's the easy thing to do because it is instinctive. But actually, what you have to do is think counterintuitively, and you have to run towards the source of your fear and find out everything that you can about it, because knowledge is power. When you know what's going on, it becomes less scary. And even if it doesn't really reduce the fear, it certainly gives you the best options, the knowledge on which to base the best options for your next step. So I went into discovery mode. And although my brain was spinning from the news that I had the big C, one of the tiny nuggets of information that I was given that day was, actually, Rich, there's an 85% 5-year survival rate for your type of cancer. Now, all of a sudden, I found out that I was at the very, very lucky end of the unlucky spectrum. And if I hadn't been in discovery mode, if I'd have gone into panic mode, if I'd have just been trying to run as fast and far away from that saber-toothed tiger as I could, I might have missed that small nugget of information. And that changed everything for me that day, and for all of the treatment, all of the stuff that I had to go through that lots of your listeners, I'm sure, who've also had cancer. Unfortunately, it's such a common thing. I knew that going through all of that horrible treatment would almost certainly result in a good outcome for me. And I know that not everybody is so lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So if I hadn't been in discovery mode, my brain would have shut down. I wouldn't have been locking in, my neocortex. I wouldn't have been doing the clever thinking that humans can do. I'd have just been in my primal instinctive run away with Rich, because this place is bad news and all it's doing is giving you bad news. And I didn't, and it changed me. And we can apply discovery even in the most awful circumstances. We can also apply it when change is good.
Yeah.
But find out what's going on, and that's the best chance you're going to give yourself to find the best way out of even a bad situation.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I'm proud of you for getting through that in such a constructive way. That must have been really difficult. That's not news that anybody wants to hear, or anything that anybody willingly likes to go through. I would like to add here that for discovery, employing that, especially in such a dire situation like yours, like that is absolutely the fear response triggered. What's really important is for us to utilize these skills of discovery when we're doing less drastic things, right? So in your day-to-day, like small things, when you get something that, what's the right word? Something that inconveniences you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Using it in those situations so that that skill of discovery becomes habitual. Because oftentimes when we're in that heightened sense of fear, like valid fear, we don't have the cognitive capacity to think clearly. So the more you can utilize these skills in lesser dire situations, the more likely it is that you will be able to do that without having to think very difficultly in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about fight or flight in the modern workplace, any HR manual that you've got in any workplace around the civilized world, fighting at work or fleeing, you either you get the news that you've lost your job, right? That's one of the worst things that could happen to you, let's say at work. And you're either going to punch your boss on the nose, or which I know we want to do from time to time, or you're going to run screaming from the building. Both of which are disciplinary offences in most companies, most organisations these days. So you have to overcome that, and discovery is a very good way to get yourself back into control and fire up your brain. Because the amazing thing about fear is that we have got the world's most powerful supercomputer between our ears, and fear has this magical ability to shut the whole thing down and just go on to hormonal fight or flight. And what we've got to do is not fight the cause of the fear, the saber-toothed tiger. We've got to fight our own reaction to that fear itself, and that's much more difficult. Giving into your fear response, fight or flight, is a walk in the park. But actually going into discovery mode, which is everything that you've been designed not to do, because back in the day, why would you go up to a saber-toothed tiger and try and find everything out that you can about saber-toothed tigers? It wouldn't be. That's the difference between life and lunch. So yeah, it is completely counterintuitive. And Danielle, it's no accident then that the way that we define adaptability is it's about having three basic skills, which is the curiosity to see the need or opportunity for change, the courage to embrace it, and the speed to pivot quickly. But before you do anything else, you have got to have the curiosity to see what's going on out there so that you can grab opportunities and manage threats as they happen. And when life does dump on you from a great height, then you have to go into discovery mode to have that curiosity to find out, okay, this situation is bad. I wish I wasn't here. But the adaptable mindset says, I recognize that this is the situation I'm in. That lovely world that existed 10 seconds ago doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Now I've got to find out what this brave new world is that I find myself in, and how to make the best of it.
Yep, definitely. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, we mentioned two of the fight or flight responses, but there's also freeze and fawn. With clients, do you find that you kind of have to tailor the emphasis on certain skills based upon certain fight or flight responses?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're quite right, of course. I tend to stick to fight or flight for the sake of simplicity.
Mhm.
But you're quite right. Freeze is major in there. And of course, when we resist change, what do? We dig our heels in,
Mhm.
and we freeze, in terms of we suddenly become the world's leading protectorate of
Yeah.
the status quo. You know, I've done a few IT implementations in my time, even though I'm not an IT guy.
Mm.
And what I learned was that people moan and bitch about their current IT system right up until the point that you try and take it away from them and give them something better, and then all of a sudden it becomes the best thing since sliced bread.
Right.
And all they want to do is freeze the situation that you've got. In fact, one of the standard mechanisms, recognized change management methods for doing projects, is to it's called unfreeze, move, and refreeze. So unfreezing people, you don't want them to fight or flight once they've unfrozen, but you want them to go into discovery mode. But yeah, you're quite right. It is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the fawn one, which is basically where you might find yourself in a dangerous situation and you completely reject everything that is you and become whatever is needed that is not you around you in order to keep yourself safe. So for that, that might look like somebody who's struggling to change because they don't really know what they want, because they've lost themselves, because they've become like a chameleon to whatever environment required them to be.
Yeah. So if what they've needed to become is not what they want to be, or not what they should be, that's when you get into what I would call resilience. Mm-hmm. And the difference between resilience and adaptability is that resilience is defined as the ability to bounce back. And adaptability is all about having the ability to bounce higher, to take a negative situation and turn it into something even more positive than before the change happened. So what you want to do is, if you've gone into fawn, as you call it, then what you want to do is at least get back to where you were before that, you personally were before that change happened. And then you can do a whole discovery exercise from that point to find out what kind of person you want to become, what kind of actions you want to take in that situation.
I love that. That's really helpful. Thank you. So is there anything else that you would add to the listeners who are struggling to become adaptable to change?
Yeah, I would. There's a really important message that I want everyone to understand. Everybody can become more adaptable if they so desire. Of course, it takes drive from within. Most people think that they can't become more adaptable because they can't really remember the last time that they ever did. And when I ask clients this, in boardrooms or seminars or whatever it is, most people say that they believe their level of adaptability is, a gift that you're given at birth. And they can no more influence it than they can their own height. It's genetic. And the good news is nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
Just because your whole history, as far as you can remember back, says you're either brilliantly or adaptable. John over there, he's brilliantly adaptable. I wish I was as adaptable as him, but at least I'm better than Fred. It just isn't true. you have a certain level of adaptability, and we all tend to, I suppose, be victims in a way, subconsciously maybe, in that we just accept the level of adaptability that we have. And most people, given that most people resist most change most of the time, we are accepting that we have low levels of adaptability in a world that is moving fast. And that's not okay anymore. That's kind of why I do what I do, because we have to become more adaptable. And guess what? We can. And the model that we've developed paints a very nice, easy, simple roadmap to get people from the fear of change through to the freedom to change. So if you've got the will combined with a few simple pragmatic tools and the ability to practice them, because learning these tools is very easy in theory, but because some of them are counterintuitive, like discovery, there's 12 of them in total, then they do take some practice. But the message is out there, and I hope it's one of hope for your listeners, which is that anybody can become more adaptable if they want to. And if you want to test yourself against that, ask yourself or answer these two questions. At marks out of 10, where 10 is brilliant and highly adaptable, how adaptable do you think you are today, right now? And then the second question is, how adaptable do you think you need to be given the state of the world and where your life is going and where you'd like your life to go? And if there is a difference between those two scores, what is it that's holding you back? Because I can tell you, whatever your answer is, it's possible to overcome that. That's my challenge to you.
I love that.
So if anybody wants to phone me up and argue about that, I'll be delighted to take that challenge.
Yes. So go ahead and tell the listeners how they can reach out to you, what you offer.
Sure, absolutely. So we do a whole load of things, from corporate leadership training through to one-to-one coaching. For details, just check out the website, www.highperformancechange.com, all one word, highperformancechange.com, and all my contact details and a whole load of videos and blogs and useful stuff is on there, all freely available.
Amazing. I will definitely make sure that I'll put that in the show notes so you guys can find that there. And this has been awesome, really insightful. I've been taking many notes. I will be applying myself. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
No, other than I really appreciate you inviting me onto the podcast, Danielle. Very nice to meet you too.
Absolutely. It was really nice to meet you too. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful day, and we will be back here next week. So thank you.